The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the quiet suburban streets as 10-year-old Emily Carter walked home from school. Her pink backpack bounced slightly against her shoulders, and her blonde ponytail swayed with each step. She hummed softly, her mind occupied with thoughts of the math quiz she had taken that day and the art project she was excited to finish. Her usual route took her past a narrow alleyway, a shortcut that she often used to get home faster. It wasn't a particularly welcoming place. Litter scattered the ground, and the walls of the buildings were covered in faded graffiti. But Emily never paid much attention to it. To her, it was just another path home. Today, however, something caught her eye. As she turned the corner into the alley, she noticed movement near the large, rusted dumpster that sat against one of the walls. Her steps slowed as she saw a boy, no older than 8, rummaging through the garbage. Emily's heart clenched at the sight. The boy was thin, his ribs faintly visible beneath a tattered gray hoodie that was far too large for his small frame. His dark brown hair was matted and unkempt, and his shoes, if they could still be called that, were full of holes. He was digging desperately through the trash, pulling out a half-eaten sandwich, brushing off the dirt, and hesitating before taking a cautious bite. Emily instinctively reached into her lunchbox, where she still had half of her peanut butter and jelly sandwich left from earlier. She took a step forward but hesitated. What if he ran away? What if he got angry at her for watching? Gathering her courage, she cleared her throat. "Hey!" she called softly. The boy froze, his body tensed, as if expecting to be yelled at or chased away. His wide, dark eyes met hers, filled with both fear and defiance. Emily took another cautious step forward. "I'm Emily," she said with a small smile. "Are you hungry?" The boy didn't respond right away. His gaze flickered to the sandwich in her hand, his fingers tightening around the piece of food he had scavenged. "I'm not gonna hurt you," she added quickly. I thought maybe you'd want this instead." Slowly, hesitantly, the boy straightened. He stared at her for a long moment before finally nodding. Just once. Emily stepped closer and handed him the sandwich. He took it carefully, as if expecting it to be snatched away at any second. He didn't eat it right away. Instead, he studied her, as if trying to figure out why she was doing this. "What's your name?" Emily asked gently. "Jake," he mumbled. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Nice to meet you, Jake." She sat down on the curb near him, watching as he finally took a bite of the sandwich. His eyes fluttered closed for a brief second, savoring the taste, before he took another, larger bite. Emily's heart ached. She had seen homeless people before, but never someone so young. Where was his family? Why was he out here alone? "Do you live around here?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. Jake shook his head. "Not really. Where do you stay?" He hesitated, chewing slowly. "Different places," he finally said. Emily frowned but didn't press further. It was clear he wasn't comfortable talking about it. Instead, she changed the subject. "I love peanut butter and jelly. My mom makes the best ones. Do you like it?" Jake nodded quickly, his mouth still full. "Good," Emily grinned. "I can bring you more tomorrow if you want." Jake's chewing slowed, and his eyes flicked up to meet hers again. There was a flicker of something there, hope maybe, but also doubt. "Why?" he asked, his voice cautious. Emily tilted her head. "Because you're hungry, and because I can." Jake looked down at the sandwich in his hands. His fingers tightened around the bread, as if it were the most precious thing in the world. "No one's ever done that before," he admitted quietly. Emily felt a lump form in her throat. "Well," she said, her voice firm, "I will." From that day on, Emily made sure to bring an extra lunch every time she passed through the alley. At first, Jake was wary. He never expected her to actually return. But every day, without fail, Emily came with a sandwich, a bottle of water, or some fruit. Sometimes they ate together, sitting side by side on the curb. Other times, Emily would leave the food for him if he wasn't there, knowing he'd find it later. Slowly, Jake began to trust her. He told her little things, his favorite color blue, his favorite food mac and cheese, though it had been a long time since he'd had it, and his dream of one day living in a house where he could sleep in a real bed. Emily, in turn, told him about her life. She talked about school, about her annoying little brother, about how she wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up. "You should come to school with me," she suggested one day, only half joking. Jake shook his head. "I can't." "Why not?" He didn't answer. Instead, he just looked away. Emily didn't push. She didn't need to. She knew, deep down, that whatever had led Jake to this life was painful. So she did the only thing she could. She kept showing up. And Jake, in his own quiet way, began to look forward to seeing her. One day, as she handed him a sandwich, Jake did something he had never done before. He smiled, a real, genuine smile. "Thanks, Emily," he said softly. Emily beamed. "Anytime, Jake," and she meant it. Little did they know, this simple act of kindness would change their lives forever. One crisp autumn evening, Emily sat at the dinner table with her parents and younger brother, Noah. The smell of freshly baked lasagna filled the air, but for once, Emily wasn't thinking about food. She was too busy twirling her fork around her plate, distracted by the words her father had just spoken. "And so, after a lot of consideration, we've decided to take the opportunity," he said. Emily's mother reached for his hand with a proud smile. "It's a big move for all of us, but it'll be a great fresh start." Emily blinked. "Wait, what?" Her father sighed. "Sweetheart, I know this is sudden, but we're moving. My company is opening a new office in another city, and they need me to help set it up. We'll be leaving in a few weeks." Emily's heart dropped. "Moving?" she repeated. "As in, leaving here?" Her mother nodded. "We've already started looking at houses. It'll be a great place for you and Noah. You'll make new friends, go to a new school. But what about Jake?" The days turned into weeks and the weeks into months. Every afternoon, like clockwork, Emily would walk the same path home, stopping at the alleyway to bring Jake food. Their conversations grew longer, their laughter more frequent. It had become a quiet ritual, one that neither of them ever talked about breaking. But life, as it often does, had other plans. The room fell silent. Emily's mother gave her a sympathetic look. "Sweetheart, I know how much you care about him, but we can't just take him with us." Her father sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's not safe for him to be on the streets. I know you've been helping him, but maybe we should contact social services." "No," Emily blurted. The thought of Jake being sent to some shelter, lost in the system, made her stomach twist. "You don't understand. He trusts me. I can't just leave him." Her mother reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "I know this is hard, but sometimes we have to say goodbye." Emily didn't eat another bite that night. The next day, Emily's steps felt heavier as she made her way toward the alleyway. The cold autumn breeze rustled the leaves, signaling that change was in the air. Jake was already there, sitting against the wall, his hoodie pulled tight around his thin frame. He looked up as she approached, his usual cautious smile appearing. But Emily's heart ached. She sat down beside him, setting down the sandwich she had packed. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Finally, she took a deep breath. "Jake, I have to tell you something." He took a bite of his sandwich, chewing slowly. "What is it?" Emily swallowed the lump in her throat. "My family is moving away." Jake's chewing stopped. He froze, staring at her. "What?" "My dad got a new job," she explained. "We're leaving in a few weeks. I don't know when or if I'll be able to come back." Jake's hands tightened around the sandwich. "So, you're just leaving?" Emily's eyes filled with tears. "I don't want to, Jake. If I could stay, I would." For the first time since she had met him, Jake's face hardened. "It's fine," he muttered, looking away. "I don't need you anyway." Emily's heart shattered. She knew he didn't mean it. She knew it was his way of protecting himself. But it still hurt. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. "This is for you," she said, placing it in his lap. Jake stared at it. "What is it?" "A promise." Jake hesitated before slowly unfolding the paper. Inside was a simple, handwritten message. "Be strong, Jake. One day we'll meet again. I believe in you." Tears welled up in Jake's eyes, but he quickly blinked them away. Emily reached into her backpack again and pulled out something else. A small, slightly worn friendship bracelet. She slipped it onto Jake's wrist. "So you don't forget me." Jake looked down at the bracelet, his fingers brushing against the colorful threads. He didn't say anything, and for the first time, Emily wasn't sure if she would ever see him smile again. The day they left, Emily pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the car window, watching as her neighborhood disappeared behind her. Her heart felt heavy, but she held on to one thought. Jake was strong. He would find a way. As for her, she would never forget him, and no matter what, she would always keep her promise. Little did she know, fate had a way of bringing people back together in the most unexpected ways. Years had passed since Emily last saw Jake. Life had moved on, but the memory of the boy in the alleyway never truly left her heart. She had grown into a strong, ambitious young woman, chasing her dreams with the same kindness that had once led her to Jake. Now in her mid-20s, Emily was working as a journalist, traveling from city to city, covering human interest stories that inspired change. She had always believed in the power of compassion, and deep down, she hoped that somewhere out there, Jake was doing okay. She often wondered what had become of him. Did he ever find a home? Did he ever get to go to school? Did he still have the bracelet she gave him? She would never know, or so she thought. It was a rainy evening when Emily's life changed forever. She had been driving home late after covering a story in a nearby town. The rain poured heavily, drumming against the windshield as her car sped down the highway. The roads were slick, visibility was low, but she was eager to get back home. Then it happened. A pair of headlights suddenly appeared in her rearview mirror, too close. Before she could react, a truck skidded into her lane, and in the blink of an eye, metal collided with metal. The world spun. The sound of screeching tires, the crunch of metal bending under force, the shattering of glass. It all blended into a terrifying symphony of chaos. Her car flipped twice before coming to a crushing halt. Everything went dark. When the paramedics arrived, they found Emily unconscious, her body battered and bruised. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead. Her breathing was shallow. Time was running out. The ambulance raced through the city streets, sirens wailing, flashing lights cutting through the night. Inside, the paramedics worked desperately to keep her stable. BP dropping. "She's losing too much blood," one of them shouted. "She needs emergency surgery. Call ahead. Tell them we have a critical patient incoming." Minutes later, they burst through the emergency room doors. Doctors and nurses rushed to her side, wheeling her toward the trauma unit. One of the doctors, a young man in his late 20s, had just finished his shift when he heard the commotion. He glanced at the stretcher as the paramedics rattled off Emily's condition. Something about the name made him freeze. Emily Carter. One of the nurses read from the patient's chart. His heart stopped. No, couldn't be. The young doctor, now frozen in place, felt his vision blur. He had spent years trying to forget the pain of the past, convincing himself that she was just a distant memory. But fate had other plans, because standing there, looking down at the broken girl on the stretcher, was Jake. Jake, now Dr. Jacob Evans, felt his knees weaken. It was her, the girl who had once saved him, the girl who had shown him kindness when the world had abandoned him. The last time he had seen Emily, she had been a bright-eyed teenager, full of warmth and compassion. Now she lay before him, lifeless and fragile. For a moment he couldn't breathe. His mind raced back to those cold nights in the alleyway, to the sandwiches she brought him, to the day she slipped the friendship bracelet onto his wrist and promised him he would find his way. He had found his way, because of her, and now it was his turn to save her. "Doctor?" a nurse called out, breaking him from his trance. "Are you okay?" Jake swallowed hard, forcing himself to push past the emotions threatening to consume him. He had a job to do. "I need a surgical team prepped now," he commanded. slipping into the role he had spent years training for. "We're not losing her." The operating room was a blur of movement. Monitors beeped, nurses worked efficiently, and Jake's hands moved with practiced precision. Every stitch, every incision, every decision. It all mattered. He blocked out everything else. The fear, the memories, the emotions, none of it could cloud his judgment. For hours, he worked tirelessly. Finally, as the first rays of morning light crept through the hospital windows, the surgery was complete. She was stable. Exhausted, Jake sat beside her hospital bed, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest. She looked so different now, older, but still unmistakably Emily. The girl who had once been his savior. The girl he had never forgotten. As he glanced down at his wrist, the faded, worn friendship bracelet still clung to his skin, a reminder of the past. She had saved him once, and now he had saved her. Soft beeping from the heart monitor filled the quiet hospital room. The early morning light filtered through the curtains, casting gentle shadows across Emily's still form. She lay motionless, her face pale, but her breathing steady, a sign that she was alive. At her bedside sat Jake. His hands trembled slightly as he held hers, his mind still struggling to grasp the reality before him. This wasn't just any patient. This was Emily, the girl who had once saved him when the world had turned its back on him. The girl who had given him hope when he had nothing. Now, fate had led them back to each other. But this time, he was the one who had saved her. He swallowed the lump in his throat, his voice barely a whisper. "It's my turn to take care of you now, Emily." Hours passed, and finally Emily stirred. A soft groan escaped her lips as her eyelashes fluttered open. At first, her vision was blurry, the white hospital ceiling swimming in and out of focus. Then, she felt the warmth of a hand holding hers. She turned her head slightly, and her breath caught in her throat. Sitting beside her, looking both relieved and overwhelmed, was a man she barely recognized at first. His face was older, his features sharper, but his eyes, those deep, familiar eyes, told her everything. Emily's lips parted. Her voice was hoarse. "Jake!" Jake let out a shaky laugh, wiping at the tears that threatened to fall. "Yeah, it's me." She stared at him, disbelief washing over her like a tidal wave. "You're a doctor?" Jake nodded, his expression unreadable. "Because of you." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. Her mind raced back to those cold nights in the alley, to the countless times she had snuck food out to him, to the simple kindness she had shown without expecting anything in return. And now here he was, alive, successful, and he had just saved her life. Her voice trembled. "You made it, Jake." A small, bittersweet smile touched his lips. "No, Emily, we made it." Over the next few weeks, Jake never left Emily's side. He personally oversaw her recovery, making sure she had everything she needed. She watched in awe as he moved around the hospital, treating patients with skill and compassion, never once forgetting where he had come from. One day, as she sat up in bed, she finally asked, "What happened to you after I left?" Jake exhaled slowly, his expression distant. "It was hard, I won't lie, but I never forgot what you told me, that I was worth something, that I had a future." He looked down at his wrist, where the old, worn friendship bracelet she had given him still clung. "I held on to this. I held on to your words. And somehow I found a way." Emily reached out, touching the bracelet with trembling fingers. "You kept it." He nodded. "It reminded me that there was good in the world, that there was you." Tears streamed down Emily's face. In that moment, she realized something profound. A single act of kindness can change the course of someone's entire life. She had believed in Jake when no one else had. And because of that belief, he had found his path. And now he had come full circle, returning just when she needed him the most. The day Emily was discharged from the hospital, Jake handed her a small, carefully wrapped box. "What's this?" she asked, puzzled. "Open it." She unwrapped it slowly, her breath catching when she saw what was inside. A small, faded piece of paper. Her eyes widened as she unfolded it. It was old and slightly crumpled, but the words were still clear. "You are not alone. You are worth more than you know. Never give up," she gasped. "Jake, is this?" He nodded. "The note you wrote me. I kept it all these years." Her hands shook as she clutched it to her chest, overwhelmed by emotion. Then, Jake pulled out one more thing, a sandwich wrapped neatly in paper. "And this," he said with a soft smile, "is my turn to repay you." Emily let out a watery laugh, shaking her head. They embraced, holding onto each other as the weight of everything settled in. This was more than just a reunion. This was proof that kindness never goes unnoticed. This was proof that love, compassion, and belief in someone can change the world. And as they stood there, two souls forever connected by fate, it was clear that neither of them would ever be alone again.